Your Town Matters is funded by the Government of Canada through the Local Journalism Initiative and supported by Cactus Media, Canada's independent community television association.
I'm Vicki Hogarth, and welcome to Your Town Matters. On location today at the Grand Manan Village Council Chambers with Mayor of Grand Manan, Bonnie Morse. Thank you so much, Bonnie, for being here today.
Thank you for being here.
We're on the island for a very special opening today of a new wellness center. Can you tell us a little bit about how this came to be and what we can expect?
This is one of the really cool stories that I'm just so excited to see the end of. Almost 2 years ago, we got the call from Scotiabank that they were closing the local branch, and there was a lot of, people were very upset, rightly so. And we all put a lot of effort into trying to keep them here in the community, and that unfortunately didn't work out. But one of the side tangents from that is the village acquired the bank building, and we didn't really have a plan of what we were going to do with it. We had some ideas, and then it all came together with our, we have a new pharmacist here on the island, came and he and his partner presented to us a concept for a wellness center and potentially a credit union down the road. So during the pandemic, we lost our dentist. He closed and didn't reopen during the pandemic. So for us to not have that available here on the island, to now have the potential to have dental checkups again here on the island, the potential for physio, there's counseling, there's all kinds of different services, and the ability for people to come in, bring their specialty for a couple days a week, couple days a month, for islanders to access that without having to go to the mainland. It's just a really exciting thing. So for us to have this in the facility here in the community, it's from a bad situation, it's turned out really good for us. So we're really excited to have this opening today, and I have to say I'm really excited to see a dental hygienist on Grand Manan first thing Monday morning. So it's great to already see the benefits starting out here on the island.
Wow, so there'll be some specialists based here, but then visiting specialists that will work out of the center.
For sure. I think they're still trying to build up their expectations and attract professionals, because nobody really knows what the demand, what the market is going to be. But I think it's one of those cases where if you build it, they will come. And I really think people are excited to take advantage of this. And the community as a whole has really rallied behind this concept. The Legion has raised money for the reception desk in memory of Laurie Brown, which is really special. They've got a tribute to him there when you first go in the door and you have the desk. One of our nurse practitioners retired a few years ago, and then she passed away this past winter. Rotary and the community has sponsored a room in her memory as well. So people have stepped forward and said, we'd really like to remember people. We'd really like to be part of having this in our community. So it's very much a community effort, and we're excited to see the fruits of that labor start to come true now over the winter and then into the next year.
Grand Mananners are known for stepping up to the plate when your community might lose something like a dentist. And the same goes for, as you mentioned, the bank. There's potential for space at this wellness center for a credit union if that's something the island's able to get off the ground.
Sure, and I'll do a shout out right now. There is a survey that's out there. I think a lot of islanders have filled it out, but if you haven't, or if you even are a summer resident or visit the island, if having a credit union or having financial services here, they're really trying to get a feel for what the level of business would be. So they've been quite successful, I think, so far in getting a lot of them filled out. So then that will be the next step to determine what that level of business will be and if there is a business case for it. But they have left space down at the Wellness Center if that potential does come through. And we're really hopeful that in the long run, we're going to end up with both the Wellness Center and a credit union in one facility. And that will be really a great thing for the island.
It's been over a year now since Scotiabank closed, and we're seeing Scotiabank, other banks follow suit in other locations too. Macadam is going to lose its bank next year as well. Having had a year plus without a bank, how's that been for the island?
I think people are trying to adjust where they can, but I think the people and the businesses that we identified that were going to have issues, they are having issues. For seniors, I think particularly it's been hard. I know anytime, if I'm going to the bank and I end up in St. George, there's usually, when you come off the ferry, there's a group of us that all end up there together. And it's people who are frustrated because they need something from a bank in person. They've tried to resolve it online, and then to be told you need to go to your branch, it's not as easy as just driving down the road. And so that's hard. And with the ferry and dry dock right now, it's that much harder to travel during this 6-week period. It's a little bit of a running joke. There's a group raising money for a splash pad. And so they'll do trivia nights, and it's a large amount of cash, and somebody's like carrying that cash away to the bank, in which there's a whole security issue around that as well, trying to take that from the island to the mainland. So I think people are trying to make the adjustments where they can, but it's hard, and there are struggles with that. So that's where I think if there is an opportunity to have a credit union come, whether it's a few days a week, whatever the service level is, the ability to be able to deposit your cash in a safe manner, if you have something go wrong with your debit card or you need help with an account, to be able to go in and talk to somebody in person. I mean, I'm old enough, I still like to talk to people in person if I've got a problem with something, and it's easier, I think, to have that understanding. So I'm really hopeful that something is going to come through and we'll end up with that service here back on the island.
I know there's a Facebook group to get people involved and interested. What would be the missing pieces to making this a reality?
I'm certainly not the expert on that. There's a group that's the leading force behind it, but that, I think, the surveys are really what the next step is, and that's really why there's such a drive on right now to have people fill them out, because they need to know that there is a business case, and if they put the money and the effort into coming to the island, that people will use the service. And I, like everybody else, I get it, I have survey fatigue, but this is one of those ones that I think there really is a benefit for the island if people will take the time to fill it out.
I'm excited to see the new Scotiabank today, to see what it's been transformed into. I remember the last time I went up close to the door was after it had closed, and there was a sign in the window saying, "Your closest bank is in St. George," which we all know is quite a journey away. It would take a whole day's trip to make that one bank visit. And you mentioned the complications of the ferry this time of year, which is something that I didn't put together last time I went to book a ferry, and it turned out on a time I wanted to be on the 9:30 ferry, it was sold out. What happens in this time of year for maybe people who are watching this and don't live on the island that can be an issue when you're trying to go about your regular mainland visits?
So every 2 years, it is a Transport Canada requirement for safety reasons that the Grand Manan Adventure goes to dry dock. And it needs to go to dry dock for regular maintenance too. It's like anything, you have to have service done on your vehicles and on your ferries. So right now, the Grand Manan Adventure is in St. John's, Newfoundland. It has been there since the 1st of October. This is one of the biggest refits that they have done. So it's scheduled for 6 weeks. We understand it will be back because for Grand Manan, the critical time is obviously at the beginning of lobster season, when the product is being shipped off the island, when we really need that extra capacity of the adventure. So for right now, we're back to one ferry, and it is the Grand Manan 5, which is a little bit smaller than the Adventure. It's about 60-ish cars compared to 80-ish cars. And so it becomes really congested, and it is hard this time of year to travel. And so with the loss of services on the island, like the loss of a bank, like the loss of a dentist, people have to travel more, because those things that you used to be able to do here, you now have to go to the mainland to do. It's compounded by the fact that our population is up. We're up by about 10% in the last census, so we have more people living here, requiring services that are no longer on the island. And so you see that, it's really a perfect storm with the last time you tried to come, and that happens frequently over the 6-week period. A lot of times people will book their travel. If they have, dentist appointments, they'll try to do them before or after the refit. they'll try to, juggle things and do what they can around those 6 weeks. The aquaculture industry is great. They'll start sending feed over to try to stockpile as much as they can to reduce the number of trips that they need. But ultimately 6 weeks is a long time, and people have to travel during that time period, so it requires a lot of advanced planning. And it's still possible to travel, but it's a little bit more challenging, and you're not doing the spur of the moment trip like you were maybe during the summer months. So we have a really great working relationship though with Coastal Transport, the province of New Brunswick, and the village. And one of the things we've done, this is I think the third refit period, but there's an additional 5th crossing for the Grand Manan 5 for anybody who'd ever wanted a midnight sail across the Bay of Fundy. It leaves the island, I think, at 11 o'clock p.m. and comes back at 5:30 a.m. out of Blacks. And that takes a lot of the commercial traffic, which frees up the space through the day for passenger vehicles, which is great. But we're still short on supply as far as the capacity on the ferries. So that's one of those long-term goals, obviously, for this council, for the community as a whole, is the Grand Manan 5 is 33 years old, and so we need to start having that conversation about what the secondary ferry is going to be. A replacement for the Adventure has been traditionally what would happen is we have a new primary and the Adventure would go to secondary, or we need to start looking at what the replacement for the 5 is going to look like. So we've started those conversations with the province, but it's a long time process to get that amount of investment for a ferry, and it's a conversation that we're going to have to continue to have.
Sounds like you have a good argument with the population growing 10%. Can you talk a little bit about that? I know that when we think of things like bank closures, there's always that worry of the impact it might have on attracting new people in particular to the island, or having younger generations move away. But you're growing. Yeah. Why do you think that is?
I think there's a couple things. One of the big things is the lobster fishery has been very lucrative over the last, decade, and we've seen a significant number of people who, I say young people, younger than me, but 20s, 30s, who have maybe left the island, who've come back with their families. So we've seen a lot of young families come back, which is great to see that segment, that demographic back on the island. We've also had a lot of people, like a lot of other places in the Maritimes during the pandemic, we had people come here because remote work becomes possible. And we have good internet here on the island. We have a local provider. And so you're able to do those communications that you can do in a big city, you can do it here. And it's a lifestyle that's a little bit more laid back, and all the advantages of being here. So there's that, and we've also seen, particularly over the last year and a half, we've had a number of Ukrainian families that have come here, and we have a lot of people who are coming for work who are, temporary foreign workers, permanent residents who are coming here to work as well. So it's probably one of the most diverse populations we've had on the island in a long time, which is really cool to see, and it's exciting to have that happening on the island, that the community is continuing to grow.
It's definitely, I know when I see swallowtail, when you are on the ferry and you see it come into view, you feel like you're away. It really does feel like such an escape from the mainland. It really is a gem of New Brunswick and really all of the Maritimes. And on that topic of swallowtail, seeing that on the ferry today was very emotional. Finally, the scaffolding is down. I think I'm seeing it on day 2 of the scaffolding being off, and it's been a community effort over a year in the making, the restoration. Can you tell us a little bit about how it feels to, first of all, have lost that beautiful view for the summer and fall, but to have it back again and for a new chapter of this iconic landmark?
For sure. And when you say, coming around Swallowtail feels like you're away, for us, it feels like you're coming home. And I think we have to say a huge thank you to CHCO, because you guys have been really active partners in the fundraising efforts, the telethon and everything to bring attention to Swallowtail. But yeah, when you look at it, it's the bright gleaming white. It looks brand new. And so to know that it has, for generations, it will continue to be there is it's a really important thing for the island. And so it was maybe not the best summer at Swallowtail because, obviously there was limited access, the scaffolding was up, so it wasn't the same view. But, there's no pain, no gain, and hopefully in the end this will all be worth it. And certainly watching the scaffolding come down, knowing that in the really a short time frame when you consider the magnitude of the project, that's been done. I think it's just a really exciting thing to know that next summer we're back to where we were and Swallowtail will be there for years to come.
Yeah, you know when you can't really put a finger on exactly what it is you're feeling, but it is that it's something from times gone by but preserved for the future. And then even hearing news that the island's grown by 10% shows you there's this new chapter coming for the island.
And I think Swallowtail is one of the, I mean, everybody is intrigued by lighthouses. They're very cool, iconic landmarks. But for Swallowtail and for the group that's looking after it, the fact that they have renovated it and that you can go inside and see what's inside and learn some of the history about it, when I compare it to what Swallowtail was like when I grew up versus what it is now, it's just, the improvement is just astronomical. Like, you can't even describe it. So it's just one of those really cool things that has happened on the island, and it's really, I'm proud to have it be part of our heritage.
Definitely. I've made a lifelong friend in Ken Ingersoll, the lightkeeper, which is sort of the beauty of following a story from the beginning to the end, is that we've met so many beautiful people along the way, and they become a part of the story of Swallowtail, but also they feel like part of our CHCO family now too. Now, I know when I saw the scaffolding this summer, it was actually quite inspiring. It represented to me this community effort of everyone coming together, putting their different individuals, groups. But another issue in terms of unsightly things was the debris pile over at North Head. But it looks like, coming over today, even from being here 2 weeks ago, the pile's diminished a lot more. Can you give us an update on how that impacted local businesses, but where we're at now in dealing with it?
Sure, and I think you've described it well when you say unsightly. I mean, it was really an eyesore, particularly as you come in on the ferry and there is this big pile of dirt. And, as I said with Swallowtail, there's always pain when you're doing a project, but this has been particularly painful just for the duration of time that it sat there. So it's been probably, over the last month or so, the material started moving. I'm not sure really where they are as far as the numbers wise, but they're moving it to the C&D site here on the island. That work is ongoing. It's, we're a little concerned about what kind of disruption that would cause, but it's been really relatively seamless. I think it's going well. And I think everybody's just relieved to finally have movement on the project, so hopefully we can see the end of this.
I know last time that we sat on the balcony at Post Office Pizza and at the Old Well Cafe, you couldn't see the water. And today you could see the boats again. So that's at least a step in the right direction.
It is, for sure. And when you look at the harbor in North Head, in the fishing industry, the aquaculture industry that's based there, having that project done is going to be vital for that harbor as well. So, the end result is hopefully, it will be good for the lobster industry, for the aquaculture industry. There will be a good result from it. It was more pain than there should have been to get to where we need to be.
Mm-hmm. And I know that we reached out to the federal government to figure out who was responsible, but it was Greenfield, but they were working with the federal government to move this.
And so, for them to finally have, come to a resolution, I think we all wished it would have happened 6 months or a year ago. But at least we've reached a point where things are moving, and hopefully things continue to move along and we can get to the end of the project in a timely fashion.
Now, there's change at council. Starting next council meeting, I think you'll have 2 new councillors. Can you talk a little bit about how that dynamic will change?
For sure. We had 2 councillors who have resigned over the last 2.5 years. So with the by-election that was held in the rest of the province in October, we had 2 councillors who are coming in by acclamation. We're really excited to have them around the table. Wayne Sturgeon, who has been on council before, and Susan Valentine, who is very involved with Rotary. She's here on the island. It's her first time on council. So Monday night, we're going to do a swearing in before our regular council meeting. So we're excited to have a full complement around the table. And I think for us, at the table, we've got a really good bond. I can't say enough good things about the group that's at the table. They're a lot of fun, but they're doing a lot of really hard work. So it will be good to have 2 more people join us and, to be back to a full complement and to keep moving forward with some of these projects.
I know one thing you've been advocating for is an air ambulance service back on the island. Can we talk about where we're at right now? I know it's been a struggle.
I'm not sure I can talk about it rationally, but yeah, it has certainly been a struggle. We're coming up on a year since the regulations changed. And we all knew the regulations were changing before that. Obviously, I believe in, that there's a role for government sitting, being mayor, that there is a place. But wow, it can be frustrating dealing with them sometimes. And this is another one of those things that shouldn't take as long as it has taken. At the end of the day, for Graham and Anners, we just want the same access to health care that the rest of New Brunswick has. And it shouldn't take years, which is what we're coming up to get a resolution on this project, on this file. We've worked with the province. We continue to have meetings. The CAO and I have a meeting bi-weekly with the Department of Health and Ambulance New Brunswick. They announced a temporary solution at the beginning of August, but there's been no tangible difference here on the island. We're still waiting. And it's frustrating to still be waiting this long down the road.
I know that it's, in many cases, a life or death issue. We went to a protest in the spring about the loss of air ambulance service, and we heard from islanders that either experienced a worse medical condition than they needed to because of the wait, or who potentially lost a loved one over this issue. It must be, when you think of it on those terms, if other people could see themselves as islanders, do you think they'd have more compassion for the situation that you're in?
I would hope so, and I think people do have compassion. I think it's hard to understand, though, if you're not here, what it does mean. We talked a little bit about this, in the lead up to Hurricane Lee, when we talked about for 36 hours, when the ferry tied up, we were essentially on our own. And while that magnified the time that we couldn't have outside help, on a foggy night in July, you are 12 hours before you can receive medical attention if there's not a plane based on the island. In January, if it's cold and there's not a plane here and there's freezing rain or the weather's not good, we're still 12 hours waiting for a ferry to be able to take someone. And if you're in a car accident and need a blood transfusion, I don't think there's anywhere else in the province that you're waiting 12 hours to receive blood. Mm-hmm. And that's just the very basics of where we are. We need a resolution, and it's time that we had one.
Tell us a little bit, though, about the airport and the latest that's taking place there.
Yeah, so this summer, we had started last year, but with the timing, it ended up happening this summer. The runway was resurfaced. So the airport was built and opened back in '89. So it obviously, over that time period, asphalt deteriorates and it was time to do a rehab. So we are really excited. The airport has been completely redone. Beautiful, 3,000 foot landing surface. The lights have been redone and it is, good for another 25, 30 years down the road. So we're excited to have that done, and it was not without a lot of pain, but there's a lot of really good efforts that went into it here by staff at the village office and by the contractor, by the engineering firm that was looking after it. They worked very collaboratively with Ambulance New Brunswick. If there was a medevac that had to come in, they were great about, making provisions for those planes to come in. So, it was a lot of cooperation, but we're really happy that, we've got the end result and we're ready to go again.
I know that the rest of the world tends to think of Southwest New Brunswick as the summer destination, but there's a lot going on in the shoulder season too. Can you talk a little bit about what's coming up on the roster for Graham and Ann, especially with the holidays approaching?
Wow. Yeah, I think you're right. People have this idea that, once we hit Labor Day that things get quiet over here. But, I drove into the community center where the village office is today. The community market is happening. That happens every 2 weeks through the winter. There's minor hockey games out back at the rink. Those are happening, if not every weekend, every other weekend. There's basketball games going on down at the school, again, all winter long. So there's always, some sort of activity going on for that. We have a Christmas parade coming up the end of the month. There's, a lot of Christmas activities coming. Of course, before we get too far down that road, we have a Remembrance Day service next weekend, like the rest of the province, the rest of the country. So there's a lot of things that are happening, and it's if he wants to find something to do, there's always things to do on the island.
And I need to shout out the Grand Manan Community Market because I have never seen fresh lobster rolls at a farmer's market before. It was a first. That was very exciting. Looking back at accomplishments of Council, Bonnie, can you talk a little bit about what you saw as maybe the biggest challenges or biggest accomplishments of things you've been able to get done in the last couple of years?
Sure. I think we've talked about some of the challenges. I think the bank closure, that was hard. The medevac issue has been hard. Like, we've had some really big, heavy issues that when we were elected back in May of 21 weren't on anybody's radar. And so, so some of the things we thought we were going to be doing, some of those had to maybe take a little bit of a back seat because of the efforts that went on with these other things. But we've done some other good things too. One of the things is we've taken over our transfer station here on the island. We're running that ourselves again, and there's a lot of enthusiasm about starting recycling programs and some of bringing things back to speed and to have us in a place where we're going into the 21st century in a little bit greener fashion than maybe where we were. We've talked about the airport was another major project of ours. There's a group that's raising money for a splash pad, and they actually had the groundbreaking last weekend, which is really exciting. So next summer we'll have that opening. And for us, that's really phase one of the pool project because, our pool closed during the pandemic. We weren't able to reopen it. It's not in great condition. It was a centennial project. It opened in 1967, so it had lived out its life. But when you think about the vision that people at the time had to say, we really want a pool on Grand Manan, and to serve for 50 years, that was a huge thing. And so that's one of the commitments that we've made is we would really like to, by the end of our term, hopefully, be in a place where we have reopened a pool down at Victoria Park. So that's our goal. There's a lot of other things that we have on the docket as well. When you look at things like housing is a huge issue here. We talked about the island growing, but the biggest barrier to growth is the fact that we don't have housing. There are 0 rentals here on the island, and that's a huge thing, like it is across the province. And, when you look at where we are with interest rates, it makes building that much more of a challenge. So we're tossing around some ideas. We're hoping to be able to do some things with that. There's a lot of things that we're working on and we're going to continue to work on, whether it is the need for paved shoulders, sidewalks, for a bike trail for, along the Route 776 where, sometimes there isn't a lot of space on the side of the road. There's a lot of things like that that are they're very much on our radar that we need to continue to work on.
Well, I appreciate you so much taking time to meet with me today, and I look forward to going to the Wellness Center with you.
I'm looking forward to that too. Thanks for being here.
My guest today has been the Mayor of Grand Manan, Bonnie Morse. I'm Vicki Hogarth. Thank you for watching Your Town Matters.